Hi, and welcome to Seasonal Wildlife of Lewisboro. I'm your host, Jenny Muller, and welcome to our summer show. We're going to talk about some of the animals that we have in our area that you will see in the summer. Summer is a time where the animals that were born in the spring are preparing and fattening up for the fall and winter. It's sort of a quiet time for a lot of species. They're raising their young, they're feeding and getting themselves fat and ready for winter. The creature that you see in front of me here is a bobcat. Now, bobcats are large predators, although not as large as a panther or a lynx, but a good-sized predator nonetheless. Unfortunately, I can't show you a living bobcat, so we have a nice specimen here that was borrowed from the museum. Bobcats are often mistaken for mountain lions or lynx, but they are not as large. Lynx, which is the cousin of the bobcat, are larger. They've got bigger paws. They've got higher hind ends, larger and longer hind legs, and they have very long ear tips. The bobcat, though, is small, but a very good hunter. Their preferred diet is rodents, but they will also take fawns in the spring, and they'll also eat domestic cats, birds, reptiles, amphibians. They have a very varied diet. You can see he's got very large paws. They're very good at getting through the snow. They have beautiful pelts, and they've been trapped for many, many, many years for their furs. Their territories are pretty varied. They range anywhere between 2 and 100 square miles, and they do a lot of their traveling during the night. They can go for a very long time without eating, which is a very neat thing about a bobcat. If prey is scarce, they can go for quite some time, and then when prey is available, they'll gorge themselves so that in case they've got lean times ahead, their bodies are prepared. The kittens are born in the spring, and the young will stay with their mom for the first year. The males are very territorial, and they will actually mark their area with anal glands, like our dogs have anal glands, but the cats do as well. And they will also spray with urine. The lifespan of the bobcat in the wild is from 7 to 10 years, longer in captivity. We don't see a lot of bobcat because they're very elusive, but they do live in our area. They can live in semi-close proximity to us, but they are very secretive and good at being undetected. Another one of our local large predators is the eastern coyote. They get a lot of news stories that you'll hear about, that they're everywhere, lurking in the bushes and stalking our pets. But that's not very accurate. The coyote is a very shy animal. They don't hunt necessarily our pets, although if it's small enough, they will take it if the opportunity is there. But like the bobcat, they prefer to hunt rodents. They love mice, they love rabbits, they eat voles. And again, in the spring, they will also take fawns. They will eat adult deer, but the only time they're taking adult deer is when there's something wrong with that deer, if it's sick, if it's weak, if it's old, injured. So this is nature's way of keeping the sick and the weak out of the gene pool. So this is a good thing. An interesting thing about the eastern coyote is that they're larger than the coyotes out west. If you've ever been out Colorado, Montana, and you've seen the coyote, they're very small compared to ours. And the reason that is the eastern coyote has quite a bit of wolf in it. So they had given them the nickname Tweed wolf, and so they have that bulk and that large size because of that. They're large, but they're quick. They can run up to 40 miles an hour. The males are larger than the females. Males range between 45 and 50 pounds. Females about 35 to 40. Their pups are born in the spring, about April or May. And the interesting thing about coyotes, if you're out and you hear them yipping and yowling, they're very vocal. But 2 or 3 coyotes, when they get going, can actually sound like a dozen. So that's pretty neat. And in a lot of Native American lore, the coyote is made out to be the trickster. So they're very good at tricking you into thinking that there's many of them when there may be only a couple. Another neat little trick that coyotes have is to avoid being detected and making a lot of noise. They'll actually walk on their toes. And they mate for life. So it keeps them very bonded with their mate. And what would summer be without dragonflies? To look up in a nice summer blue sky and see hundreds of these little guys flying around, eating all the airborne insects, you know that we have a healthy environment, because a dragonfly is an indicator species. And the healthier our air and water, the more of these we've got around. There are many different species of dragonflies. And the neat thing about them is that they are a very ancient insect. They were here before the dinosaurs. So that makes them a very old creature. They start their lives in the water as aquatic little underwater creatures called nymphs. And these nymphs will sit at the bottom of a pond and eat other little animals. They'll eat sometimes a tadpole. They have a funny little jaw that comes out and grabs their prey. And they'll stay underwater for quite some time, growing, and each time they get a little bigger, they shed. And they grow some more, and they shed some more. And this goes on until he's reached the age where he can come out of the water and start to breathe air. And when they first do that, they're very soft. They don't have a hard shell. They're, like all insects, ectoskeleton, which means that they don't have bones on the inside. Their hard shell on the outside is what keeps their bodies from caving in on itself. So when they're in the process of drying, they're very vulnerable to predation, and a lot of things will take this opportunity to gorge on them. Birds love to eat them, and frogs love to eat them. So if they can get past that stage and harden up, then they take to the air. If you look closely, you can see they've got these 2 big bulbous eyeballs, and those eyes are loaded with individual lenses, and this is called the compound eyes. They have amazing vision, and the vision takes up 80% of their brain. So the brain is basically all about sight. There are some wives' tales that are said about that they bite, they sting, they'll sew your lips up. None of this is true. They don't bite, they don't sew your lips up. They're wonderful insects to have, and to see them in the sky is a wonderful thing. They're great controllers of invasive insects, the blood-sucking insects. So everything about them is positive. And another neat thing about them is they see color better than we do. And some species will actually migrate. Another summer creature, if you're playing in the water or walking by a stream, throwing rocks in there, cooling your feet, you'll see a lot of these. Cousin to the lobster, the crayfish. Crayfish come in different colors. This is, I wouldn't say a youngster, but he still has some size to reach. So the crayfish come in 3 different color varieties, a blue, a red, and even a white, which I've never seen. I don't think they're very common. This one is more of the blue. You can see his legs have a bluish tint. The rest of his body is darker. The crayfish, they stop growing at the age of 4. But they can live between 10 and 20 years, which is quite a long time for a little creature. They will molt, very much like an insect. They have the exoskeleton. And they'll, at the end of June when they molt, they will eat that ectoskeleton because it contains phosphorus and it contains calcium. So they eat that to get that back into their bodies. They are very good swimmers. They swim backwards. They will walk forward and they'll swim backward, just like a lobster. They curl their little tail under and they shoot away very, very quickly. Crayfish will also clean the water of debris. So they'll eat carrion. They'll eat rotting vegetation. So they help to keep that water in good shape. They also, if you take a good look, they have eyeballs that sort of sit on little stalks, and they can move them independently. So they've got pretty good vision for a little funny creature. Now, one of the true sounds of summer to me is the sound of the cicadas. When I talk to people about cicadas or they are listening to them up in the trees, they sometimes call them locusts. Well, a locust is a locust, which looks like a grasshopper. And this is a grasshopper. Not a locust, but it's a grasshopper. Okay, so the locust and the grasshopper have the same body shape. Now a cicada looks completely different. The cicada, the males are the ones that make the sound, and they don't rub their wings together to do it, but underneath their bodies they have interesting little plates on their abdomens, and those are called tymbals, and they vibrate these to make that noise that we hear. In the insect world, the cicada is the loudest that there is. There are different species of cicada all around the world. And there's two different kinds that we have here. We have the periodical cicada, which are the ones that will come out every 17 years. And those have red eyes. And then we have our regular cicada, and this is an annual cicada. The females will lay hundreds of eggs in the trees. And once those eggs hatch, the larvae fall to the ground, they'll burrow into the soil, and they'll live underground, growing and shedding and growing and shedding until the following spring, where they will climb up and they'll molt for a last time. And I'm sure you've seen those funny little papery tan casings. Sometimes you see them on the side of trees or on the side of a bench. So that's the juvenile stage, and then their bodies change into the final shape, which is this. And they'll live up in the trees and they'll mate, and then their life cycle is done. They only live for 1 month as an adult, but while they are adults, they feed on the juices of plants. And if you look closely, this little fellow has expired, but you can see his mouth part is like a straw that's folded down against his body there. And they use that straw much the way we would use a straw to suck down a milkshake, only he is taking the fluid out of plants. One of the creatures that we have that's very popular and numerous in our area, but not very often seen, is the Screech Owl. We have two different color phases of Screech Owl, are the red phase and the silver phase, the red phase being a little less common. The owls, for the most part, during the day, they rely on camouflage. If you look at the feathering, it looks very much like tree bark. So when they're sitting up in a pine tree or any other kind of tree, you could walk right by them and never see them. The Screech Owl is one of the smallest owls that we have. This particular bird is going through a molt, so he's not in the finest of feather. But if you look above his eyes, you would see what they call ear tufts. Those are not his ears, that's just feathering. The ears are placed like ours. They're on either side of the head. And their hearing is incredibly acute. Their sight is incredible. So when they're hunting, they'll sit up in a tree and they're just going to listen. And they'll listen for the scurrying of some little creature, like a little rodent, rustling through the leaves. And the sound of that creature is going to bounce off of the feathers around their eyes. If you look at the feathers around the eyes, it kind of looks like flower petals, the way they come out. And this is called the facial disc. And the facial disc acts like a satellite, and it spreads the sound to their ears so that they can pick their prey up with complete accuracy. And a lot of species will actually rely 100% on sound, more so than sight. Owls do not have a crop like a lot of birds. So when they eat their prey, it goes right into the gut. It doesn't sit there in that crop and get digested. It goes right to the stomach. And then after a time, the fur and bones, or the feathers and bones, depending on what they ate, will be cast out in the form of a pellet. So they sort of cough up this ball of the undigested bones and fur, and you'll get the entire skeleton of whatever creature it is that they ate. Their talons, which are the nails on the feet, are an incredible tool. They have a lot of pressure in those feet. And another thing about owls is that they are gifted with what's called silent flight. The feathers, the flight feathers on their wings are actually serrated so that when they're flying through the air, it doesn't make any sound, so they rely on stealth. The Screech Owl is also given that name because they have a wide variety of vocalizations. One of them is like a screech or like a yell. And they also have another little sound that sounds like a little pony whinnying. So if you're out and about in the evening and you hear little creatures rustling about, one that might sound like a little screech owl, go and see if you can't find that little guy. I'm Jenny Muller. Thank you for joining us for our summer edition of Seasonal Wildlife of Lewisboro. Stay tuned for our winter show and enjoy the rest of summer.
You're watching Lewisboro Community Television, Channel 20.